Before we get started, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so that you don't miss any of the content that is released by GoCollect. And if you're interested, head over to Regie Collects here on YouTube. Reggie here, your friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector, as well as the host of the GoCollect Weekly Speculation Recap. And I want to welcome you to another one of our videos. This video, I think, is going to be a good one. And you might wonder why. Because there is a little something for everyone in this video. There's DC, there's Marvel, there's a little bit of speculation around streaming services and the MCU. There's even some unsung heroes that are highlighted in this one. And there's also, in this very first blog post, a pretty interesting take. This blog post from Ryan is very different from things that we've covered here on the channel. And it's different because he's not talking about characters that might appear in the MCU or in a streaming service. He's not talking about creators that worked on a book. He's not talking about stories or even covers. What he's actually highlighting is 5 panels within multiple books that you might want to consider picking up because of the impact of these 5 panels on Marvel, but also in some cases on the industry as a whole. And again, this is very different from anything that we've seen before. And I think it's actually really well done. And I definitely want to encourage you to read this blog post in its entirety because I'm only going to touch on some of it, but there's some good stuff in here. And in this blog post, again, he highlights 5 panels in 5 different books. And the very first one is a Fantastic Four book. It is Fantastic Four number 5, where Dr. Doom essentially serves as the Grand Master. And Dr. Doom is an important character in the landscape of Marvel Comics. And if there's any doubt to that, you need to check these books out, look at the history of Dr. Doom, and you will certainly be impressed. But again, there is an interesting panel in Fantastic Four number 5 that you absolutely want to take a look at. The very next book that Ryan highlights is Amazing Fantasy number 15, a book that I want in my collection at some point, but there is a specific panel that Ryan highlights that is the cornerstone of Spider-Man, of Peter Parker. And I'm not going to give it away. We might actually show it here on screen, but I'm not going to give it away. But I definitely want to encourage you to check this one out because it is a powerful panel that essentially underpins everything that Spider-Man and Peter Parker is all about. Ryan goes on to highlight 3 other panels. One of them comes from Avengers number 4. Another comes from Secret Wars number 8. And many of you probably know what that panel is. And the very last one comes from House of M number 7. And all I will say to you is no more mutants. Again, a very different take on speculation. The link to this blog post by Ryan is in the description of this video. This next blog post is one that will probably speak to a lot of you out there. If you've ever given a book away or sold a book, this one will probably strike a chord with you. And this blog post is actually written by Robert. And in this blog post, he highlights how he made a huge mistake in the fact that he sold a book too soon. He was not patient and actually sold a book too soon. And this is a really cool one, if you will, because it is very much a cautionary note and highlights the importance of having some patience when you're actually trying to sell a book and when you're actually trying to turn a profit from that book. And I'm not going to give the whole story away to you, but I will tell you that he picked up a really nice book at a great price. The book was graded. It had a really great grade, and he rushed the sale and probably left a lot of money on the table. And this is, again, something that many of us have probably done. And if you haven't done it, you absolutely want to check this article out to make sure that you can learn from the mistakes of others. This blog post, like all of the others that I'll be talking about, is linked in the description. In last week's speculation recap video, we spent some time talking about some books that were on the modern index on the GoCollect website, and we identified several books that were moving up the list rapidly because of all the speculative hype surrounding those books, and they were all modern books. This week, Matt Tuck actually takes a look at the silver index, and he looks at some books that are on that list that are moving up as well that you might want to take a look at. And I actually want to read an excerpt from his blog post entitled "The Hottest Silver Age Comics on the Market." And in this blog post, Matt writes that it's all about the MCU. Thanks to movies, sequels, streaming services, and rumored appearances, Marvel dominated the Silver Age market. Of all the issues listed on the GoCollect Hottest Comics Index, Marvel owns everything that is on fire at the moment. Matt goes on to talk about several fantastic books that are on this index and are moving up rapidly. The very first one is Fantastic Four #3 that has actually moved up 317 spots on the list. This is a book that I absolutely love. The cover of this book is fantastic, and I also enjoyed reading the story. I don't own it, but I love to have this book in my collection. Another book that he highlights, which is currently ranked 100 on the list, is Incredible Hulk #1. This book has actually moved up 235 spots on the silver index, and again, doing incredibly well. If you've never read this book, I would encourage you to read it digitally or to get a reprint because it's actually a pretty cool read, as is the next book that's currently on the list, Amazing Spider-Man #33, which has moved up 220 points. This is one of my personal favorites. The moral story that is captured in this book, I think, is personally a fantastic story by Stephen Ditko. Just incredibly well done. If you haven't read this one, treat yourself. There are several other Fantastic Four books on this list as well, including Fantastic Four #66 and 53. Both have moved up more than 100 points on the list. Both are really, really fantastic stories as well. And I'm not going to give you the rest of the list. I want to encourage you to go read this one because this is actually a really cool blog post. I love Silver Age books. Many of you probably do as well. So I definitely want to encourage you to head over, check out this blog post. Matt Tuck does a fantastic job. I think that you'll enjoy this blog post. So I'm going to tell you guys, I am a huge fan of comic books, and I think many of you know that. I read a ton of books every single week. I read some Marvel, some DC, some Image. I read some independents as well. I read a ton of stuff because I enjoy comics. I enjoy the escapism. I enjoy the stories. I enjoy the artwork. But I'm going to tell you, I don't think that I have ever read a story about the Squadron Supreme. I'm going to be completely honest. I've never read anything involving these guys. But the blogger, Robert, actually asked the question as to whether you should pay attention to the Squadron Supreme. And in his blog post, he actually spends a little bit of time talking about some news, some speculative news, some rumors that have been out there from a well-known scooper who actually reveals online that a Squadron Supreme project is actually in development at Marvel Studios. And while this is out there, there wasn't a whole lot of clarity as to whether this was an MCU play or whether this was going to be something on the Disney streaming services, but I think that people may be taking notice of the Squadron Supreme. And if you're like me and don't quite know who the Squadron Supreme is, it's usually a team that is comprised of Hyperion, Nighthawk, Power Princess, the Wizard, Dr. Spectrum, and Sky Max. Again, I've only heard of maybe one of those characters, but if you want to take a look at this team, you might want to check out Avengers #85. In his blog post, Robert actually points out that in January of this year, a 9.4 copy of Avengers number 85 actually sold for $300. And he highlights that this was before any type of rumors of this team appearing in the MCU, before any of that stuff actually hit the web. And in his blog post, he actually highlights that on eBay at the moment, a 9.4 copy is actually being offered up for $600, which I think is a pretty interesting price. I did not get a chance to look up the F&V of this particular book, but if you think that there may be something there, if this well-known, breaker of gossip and news regarding the MCU could be right, then you might want to take a look at this book. As a fan of Spider-Man, I am oftentimes asked by people whether I prefer MJ or Gwen Stacy. And I can tell you, MJ is pretty cool. I've enjoyed reading her over the years, but I am Team Gwen Stacy all the way. And it appears that one of the GoCollect bloggers is as well, because in this blog post, they basically highlight that Gwen Stacy might have some staying power. And they actually encourage us to take a look at some of the books that are associated with Gwen Stacy if we believe that she has a big future to play in the Spider-Verse universe. And they highlight in this blog post her first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man number 31. This is a really cool book, not only because it is Gwen Stacy's first appearance, but it's also the first appearance of Harry Osborn, who goes on to become the second Green Goblin. In addition to this really fantastic book of Amazing Spider-Man, they spend some time talking about some other books that you might want to take a look at, including those that are associated with Spider-Gwen. And the blogger highlights that she's perky, intelligent, and relatable, making her books immensely popular. And so again, if you think that something could happen with Gwen Stacy down the road, you might want to take a look at this blog post and all of the books that are actually highlighted in this one, because there may be something that you want to pick up. So this next blog post is actually a really interesting one for me. And it's interesting not only because it's well written, but it's also based upon something that I'm literally reading right now. I am like on issue 3 of this series. And the blogger essentially is making the recommendation that you might want to not just pick up one, but you might want to pick up the entire series, which is essentially an 8-issue story arc. And they're specifically talking about the true savior of Gotham, that being the Joker. That is right. You heard me correct. We are talking about Batman White Knight. And this series, written and illustrated by Sean Murphy, is very interesting because it actually dives deep into how Gotham City would be if the Joker was actually a good guy versus a crazed psychopath that kills indiscriminately. Again, it's very, very different from what I expected with this particular book. When I picked it up and I started reading it, I thought it was going to focus more on Batman. It actually focuses a lot more on Joker, but I'm only in issue 3, and it may change as we move into some of the later issues. But it's definitely an interesting book, and the blogger actually highlights several reasons why you might want to take a look at this. One, because it's different, because you see the Joker in a different light, but also because there's multiple Batmobiles, there are 2 Harley Quinns, and there's also Mr. and Mrs. Freeze. They also highlight here that all of the issues in this series have actually maintained their values above $40, and some are actually going for around $100 at CGC 9.8. And so if you're curious if anything that I just highlighted from this blog post captures your fancy, you might want to take a look at these books. But I definitely want to encourage you to check out this blog post. The link is in the description. So there you have it. That's this week's GoCollect Weekly Speculation Recap. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I definitely want to encourage you to leave a comment behind, hit the thumbs up, and tune in next week when we do this all over again.